The older I get, the less I think How I Met Your Mother was trying to teach us through Ted. Some of the biggest ideas in the entire series came from people who walked into the story, changed everything, and disappeared before anyone realized they had. The strange part is, I don't think we were supposed to notice them the first time. Because the first time you watch How I Met Your Mother, you're chasing the same thing Ted is. Who is the mother? Years later, that question starts to matter a little less. You stop watching for the ending. You start noticing the conversations that quietly stayed with you. None of these characters were around for very long, yet somehow they understood love, timing, and growing up in ways that keep making more sense the older you get, since their words have a strange way of catching up to you down the road, usually around the time life gives you a reason to understand them. Funnily enough, none of these people were written like mentors. They don't arrive with life-changing speeches. They don't dominate entire seasons. Most of them don't even get a proper goodbye. They're simply there for a moment, and then life moves on. Just like the people who quietly shape us in real life. It might be why these scenes feel different when you come back to them years later. Not because the episodes changed, because you did. A conversation that once sounded romantic suddenly feels heartbreaking. A joke starts sounding like wisdom. A side character you barely remembered somehow ends up explaining something you've been trying to put into words for years. In hindsight, these characters were never just moving the story forward. They were leaving behind ideas that would only make sense after we'd lived a little more. There are more characters worth talking about, but today I want to focus on 4. Let's start with Klaus. Most people remember Klaus for one reason. Lebenslange Schicksalsschatz, the absurdly long German word translated to lifelong treasure of destiny, that somehow became one of the show's most unforgettable scenes. But every time I revisit that Farhampton episode, I find myself paying less attention to the word and more to the man saying it. Because Klaus isn't giving Ted advice. He's trying to make sense of his own life. He has just walked away from Victoria, a woman he genuinely cares about, a woman who, on paper, should have made perfect sense. There isn't a villain, no betrayal, no dramatic fight, just a quiet realization that something essential is missing. That's what makes the scene linger, I think. Most television teaches us why relationships end. Someone lies, cheats, or stops trying. Klaus introduces a much quieter possibility. What if sometimes nothing is wrong? What if 2 good people can love each other and still be walking toward different futures? That's a much harder idea to live with, since there's nothing to blame, only something to accept. Ted thinks he's listening to Klaus explain soulmates, but that's not really what's happening. He's describing the moment he stopped confusing love with certainty. I used to think that scene was about finding the one. These days, I think it's about recognizing when you've reached the edge of an almost. Those aren't the same thing. Because almost doesn't usually announce itself. It often looks exactly like the future you imagined, until one day, it doesn't. Klaus never tells Ted who he's supposed to love. He simply leaves him with a different question. Not who is the one, but how will you know when you're walking toward your future instead of standing still inside a beautiful almost? Klaus made peace with letting go of certainty. Kevin's lesson is rougher, about what we choose to leave unsaid. There's one line of his that I barely caught on my first watch. Just because something needs to be told doesn't mean it needs to be heard. At first, it almost sounds wrong. Isn't honesty supposed to be the right call, the thing we're always taught to default to? Tell people how you feel, say what's on your mind, don't leave things unsaid. Watching it again now, I don't think Kevin was talking about honesty at all. He was talking about where we choose to place our attention. Robin arrives ready to tell Kevin what happened between her and Barney. Before she can say a word, Kevin quietly shifts the conversation somewhere else. He isn't asking what happened. He's asking, who are we choosing to be from this moment on? My first impression was that Kevin was letting something go. Now it seems like he understood something I didn't. We spend so much of our lives believing that every relationship is built by uncovering the past. But some relationships survive because two people decide what they'll do next. That's the shift for me on a rewatch. Kevin no longer feels like the therapist with clever advice. He feels like someone who understands that maturity isn't about dissecting every mistake we've ever made. Sometimes it's about deciding which truths help us grow and which ones only keep us trapped in yesterday. So really, Kevin's line wasn't about keeping secrets. It was about refusing to let yesterday have the final word over tomorrow. And oddly enough, that lesson became even more meaningful when I remembered how Kevin and Robin eventually ended. They didn't break up because of hidden truths. They broke up because, when they were finally honest about the future they wanted, they realized love couldn't bridge that difference. Kevin accepted Robin exactly as she was, even when it meant walking away. And once you start seeing relationships that way, you begin looking at your biggest decisions differently. That shift in thinking carries straight into the next scene with James. For most of How I Met Your Mother, James is easy to remember for the laughs. His chemistry with Barney is unforgettable, and almost every scene they're in together is pure comedy. But the one moment that actually sticks with me is a quiet conversation with Ted. In The Rebound Girl, Ted starts looking for another way to build the life he wants. Maybe finding the right person doesn't have to come first. Maybe there are other paths that make just as much sense. James listens, then tells Ted about a decision he almost made years earlier. He says, "About 10 years ago, my best friend and I nearly did the same thing. She was single, I was single. We both wanted a family. It made sense. But now, every day we thank our lucky stars that we didn't do it. 'Cause what she found with her husband, and what I found with mine, it was worth the wait." The first time around, I assumed I understood exactly what he meant. It was worth the wait. To me, it was a simple message: be patient. The right person will eventually come along. It felt comforting, like the universe had a way of making long waits pay off in the end. But coming back to that scene now, I hear those words a little differently. It's not that James is celebrating the fact that he waited. It's that he's grateful for who he became because he didn't rush. 10 years earlier, he and his best friend wanted the same thing: a family. If they had said yes, they probably could have built a good life together. That's what makes his story so powerful. He isn't looking back at a terrible decision he narrowly escaped. He's looking back at a perfectly reasonable one, and realizing that, if he had chosen it, he never would have discovered the life that truly belonged to him. My 20s self probably wouldn't have gotten this. Back then, I thought waiting was about hoping someone would eventually arrive. I see it differently now. It was doing something much quieter. It was changing the people who would eventually make the decision. Time wasn't simply bringing the right people into their lives. It was giving them the chance to grow into lives that fit them more honestly than the ones they almost chose. With every rewatch, I hear James talking less about finding the right partner and more about gratitude that he didn't let one chapter of his life decide the rest of the book. It comes down to the real meaning of "it was worth the wait." Not because waiting guarantees a happier ending, but because some of life's most important decisions deserve to be made by the person you'll become, not just the person you happen to be today. Those are much harder decisions, since logic can solve today's problem, but can't tell you whether you're building a life you'll still recognize years from now. And here's the part we rarely consider. Even when we make the right choice, life doesn't always unfold on the timeline we imagined. We can choose wisely, let go when we need to, and still find ourselves asking, why isn't it happening yet? Which is probably why Stella's line about waiting hits differently now. When I first heard Stella tell Ted she's getting here as fast as she can, it sounded like hope, a promise that somewhere out there, the mother already existed, that no matter how many wrong turns Ted took, the story was still moving toward the person he was always meant to meet. It was comforting. It made waiting feel romantic. I hear it differently these days, because eventually, life teaches you that waiting isn't always the hardest part. Fighting the waiting is. We spend so much of our lives believing we're behind our friends, our plans, the version of ourselves we thought we'd be by now. Every delay starts to feel like evidence that something has gone wrong. Ted spends almost the entire series trying to outrun that feeling. Every failed relationship becomes another reason to wonder if life has missed its chance. But Stella never tells him to hurry. She never tells him to keep searching harder. She simply says, "You may have to wait a little while longer. She's getting here as fast as she can." It sounds less like a promise about Tracy and more like permission. Permission to stop treating life like it's late. Because by the time Ted meets Tracy, neither of them is the person they were years earlier. They had to become those people first, not because destiny demanded it, but because life was still doing its quiet work while they were busy wondering why nothing seemed to be happening. I missed that completely on my first watch. I thought the line was about waiting for the right person. I read it now as trusting the right season of your life. I suspect that's why Stella's words linger long after the episode ends. They remind us that the goal isn't to become better at waiting. It's to stop fighting time like it's something working against us. Because sometimes the life we think is delayed is simply still unfolding. On my first watch of How I Met Your Mother, I thought these people were simply passing through. They showed up, helped move the story along, and disappeared. But now, I think their words just needed time to catch up with us. Klaus made me realize that love and certainty aren't always the same thing. Kevin taught me that maturity isn't measured by how honestly we speak, but sometimes by knowing when honesty no longer serves anyone. James reminded me that the biggest mistakes in life rarely look reckless. More often, they look perfectly reasonable. And Stella quietly changed the way I think about time itself. Pulling back, these conversations were never just about love. They were about timing, acceptance, growing up, and the quiet choices that shape a life. How to let go, how to choose, how to wait, and how to grow. Maybe that explains why How I Met Your Mother feels like a different show every few years. Not because the episodes change, not because the writing changes, but because we do. The people we overlooked somehow become the people we understand the most. And that might be the most beautiful thing about coming back to stories we love. Sometimes they aren't waiting for us to remember them. Maybe they've been waiting for us to become the person who could finally understand what they were trying to say all along. I'm sure I left out someone who changed the way you see the show. So tell me, which minor character deserves to be on this list? And what line still sticks with you today? Thanks for paying attention.